worry about is Heathrow air traffic, but I suspect they might stop that for a few minutes.
You think?
I think they can do what they like. I mean, if POTUS is flying in and the King's entertaining, I think Heathrow will do what it's told.
I'm delighted to be joined by the man who's chronicled more royal moments than most of us have had cups of tea, royal historian and author Robert Hardman, whose new edition of his book, Charles III, The Inside Story, is actually out today. So it's great timing to have you here, Robert. Welcome
Thank you.
to
Thank
the
you,
Royals.
Kate. Very pleased to be here.
Well, it's a very special day to have this discussion as we're in London, and it won't be long before, shortly, we're going to be welcoming Donald Trump in Windsor. Let's talk a bit about state visit protocol, the formalities and the machinery that's probably already been going on for a long time. What are the key ingredients, do you think, Robert, that make a visit like this such a success?
Well, you hit the nail on the head at the start there, Kate, when they are the ultimate sort of diplomatic tool. It's the ultimate diplomatic accolade, really. One country pays another. And there are various sort of levels of visit in the palace, official Downing Street Foreign Office rankings. You've got official visits, private visits, but the state visit is the big one because it does follow a sort of a template. In royal terms, it is the one occasion when absolutely every part of the royal household gets involved, the whole lot, from obviously the master of the household is in charge of laying on the gold plate and the food and making it all look great. The Lord Chamberlain's office are doing all the ceremonial stuff. The royal collection have got to get all the treasures ready. I mean, it's a real team effort. And although they have been doing this, since, longer than I've been alive, you've been alive, I mean, the kind of modern state visit really started, I suppose, back in the late Victorian era. But each one is taken as though, let's start from scratch. Nothing's taken for granted. It's got to be done perfectly. And there are always little sort of tweaks here and there. But this is a huge one because it's the President of the United States. They are our biggest and one of our oldest allies. There's a lot of talk about it being unprecedented second state visit, and actually it's not quite the case because there have been one or two other world leaders who've had two state visits, but it's certainly
First for a US president.
First for a US president,
Yeah.
exactly.
And previous US presidents have obviously come over more than once. They've had the state visit, and then they've come back, but it's more of a kind of cup of tea at Windsor with the monarch. Perhaps
state visits actually for US presidents are relatively recent. Previous US presidents didn't tend to, because they have such tight schedules and they've got so much to do, they preferred official visits. So actually the very first US state visit wasn't until George W. Bush, i.e. in this century, and back in, just over 20 years ago. So when one thinks to those great visits, like the most famous one probably is the Ronald Reagan visit, when there he is on horseback with the Queen at Windsor. One of the great sort of defining post-war images. Actually, that wasn't a state visit. It was an official visit. I mean, looking at it, it looked just like a state visit. It had a white tie banquet. I mean, it had all the trimmings. But officially, it wasn't a state visit because there wasn't time to do a full state visit. It does take a few days to kind of cram in a state visit.
And most people won't be aware of the distinction between what makes an official visit, an informal visit is a bit more obvious, but the difference between an official visit and a state visit. So how would you describe that distinction?
Well, an official visit can just be, last a few hours. I mean, President Trump's first visit to Windsor Castle was actually an official visit in 2018. He came for a cup of tea with the Queen. And you still lay on a guard of honour. I mean, there's still a lot of sort of protocol and pageantry and what have you.
Well, he was still inspecting the guards, wasn't he, in that 2018
famously
visit?
Inspecting the guards, and that comes with an official visit. But what you don't get the state banquet, the processions, the exchange of gifts, the exchange of decorations. A lot of the sort of tangential stuff that goes
the
with
full bells and whistles treatment.
I mean, I think what it boils down to is, do you put on white tie, and does the George IV dinner service come out, and do you get all that amazing gold plate on the table? And by the way, the table at Windsor, although it's not Buckingham Palace, I think Windsor's actually the best setting of all.
But we were both there for the Emmanuel Macron visit, weren't we, in July? And they said that they'd spent a week laying the table.
Well, it takes about a week to put the table together. It's actually, it's the longest table in Britain. When they put it all together, I've seen them do it. Yeah, we would Well, I was doing a documentary down there some years ago for a previous French president, when President Chirac was coming to celebrate the centenary of the Entente Cordiale, and we watched them put the table together, and it's I can't remember how many leaves, as they say it is, but I mean it's lots of sections, and when you put them all together, it is the longest single table in Britain, and it seats, off the top of my head, I think it's 134 people. And it takes up the full length of St George's Hall, and it's absolutely magnificent.
It's
Whereas
incredible.
at Buckingham Palace, you get a U-shaped table, which is obviously very dramatic, but I don't think a U is quite as impressive as this vast.
It's funny, isn't it? It's not as impressive. Obviously, it's taking place in Windsor because they've got the resurfacing work going on at Buckingham Palace. But yeah, there are those lovely touches at St George's Hall, and you have the candle lights with the their own little lampshades on.
Feels
and all
much
that sort of
more. It
detail.
feels much more.
It's more
royal.
intimate.
Yeah, well,
more
it's
intimate.
in a castle. It's got, it's got suits of armour everywhere. I mean, it's literally there's some more suits of armour in Windsor Castle actually than any museum, and it's got cannon and guns and all the shields of all the knights of the Garter going back to 1343 on the ceiling. So I mean, it really is. It's proper knights in shining armour, damsels in distress. I mean, all you need is a dragon.
A lot of people might remember having seen, if they didn't live through it, the Eisenhower visit when Dwight Eisenhower came over in 1959 to Balmoral, and that really sort of, in my mind, sort of started that kind of special relationship between the palace and the US presidents. I'm told that a young Prince Charles was told to call him Uncle Ike, which was Eisenhower's
I didn't know that. That's sweet.
Yeah, and I think, that kind of informality as well, that sort of special relationship. How do you think the role of the royal family helps seal that, what we often hear being the special relationship between the US and the UK?
Well, I think that's a very good point. I mean, you hear about the special relationship, and it sort of goes in and out of fashion. So, for example, when Ronald Reagan came on that trip in 1982, and I dug out, actually did a Freedom of Information request to get the files out on that visit, and got some of the documents out. And at the time, the Foreign Office, everyone was under strict orders not to say the word special relationship. It was seen to be a bit presumptuous back in the 80s. Don't say special relationship. And yet, in more recent times, I mean, when Barack Obama was here in 2011, I mean, you couldn't stop him talking about the special relationship. Donald Trump talks about it. So, but I think that the real relationship as such is not so much between the Prime Minister and the President, but it is between the royal family and the President, because I mean they're the two heads of state. And you mentioned the Eisenhower visit, and that was I don't even think that was an official one. I think it was a sort of semi-official.
Yes, it wasn't a kind of state visit.
No,
as
well, it was to Balmoral, which is a private residence, and then you had visits like the famous John F. Kennedy and Jackie O coming in for dinner in 1961, and that was it was a black tie dinner. It was certainly official, but it certainly was not a state visit. And don't forget, you had these sort of these problem areas, because although overall it's been a very harmonious, they're our greatest ally. But there've been a couple of big bumps in the road. I mean, there was Suez, for starters, which was a disaster for UK-US politics. And then there was the Vietnam War, when Lyndon B. Johnson was determined to try and get some sort of British presence there.
Then the only president not to have met the late Queen during her reign. Yeah,
he would have met her, actually, had he was meant to come over for Churchill's funeral, but he was very ill and his doctors advised him against it. So he was the one who didn't get to meet her. But throughout the Vietnam War, and Britain and America were at sort of loggerheads then, and Johnson was furious that Harold Wilson just wouldn't send any troops, nothing. But keeping the kind of flame alive, if you like, was the fact that, the Queen did have a dog in the fight because she's Queen of Australia, and Australia did send troops to Vietnam. And one of the Queen's favourite veterans, Keith Payne VC, one of East Victoria Cross, for incredible bravery, saved dozens of young Australian troops from an ambush single-handedly, and he got the Victoria Cross. So, so there was a sort of royal element to things like to Vietnam, even if Britain itself was standing away from it. So that kind of again goes to this point that it just moves at a different level.
The ups and downs in the road.
Yeah.
I remember there being some kind of government documents that were unearthed at one point, which said that Bill Clinton on one visit had been offered tea with the Queen and had declined it because he'd rather go we have plans to go for a curry with the Blairs, with Tony and Cherie Blair. But Obama seemed to be, in recent history, Obama did seem to have a very genuinely warm relationship with the Queen.
No, there's no question that the Obamas, it was the Obamas, not just Obama. I mean, Michelle as much as Barack, who really did forge, I think you can say it's a genuine friendship. As you said earlier, I mean, often world leaders would come on these official visits, but they would often sort of then hit it off with the royals, particularly the late Queen personally, and would then come back. So I mean, Nelson Mandela was always dropping in for tea whenever he was in London, and so the Obamas early on in the administration, Obama came here. I think it was either for a G7 or a NATO summit, and that was the time when Michelle Obama got criticised by some people in the press for being seen to put an arm. Do you remember she was touching
Yes, well,
the
I was
Queen?
going to get on to protocol. And it caused all sorts of...
It did at the time, and it was ridiculous.
What was your view of that?
I mean,
because people talk about protocol, but, you know, in our job, we sort of think it's not quite as formal as people
It's not.
expect.
And also, it's when you find out the backstory. So I did then find out the backstory, actually,
And
from one of Obama's senior aides, that the Queen and Michelle Obama were having a discussion about heel sizes. And they wanted to compare each other's heels. And the Queen was saying, well, I have these square heels that help me sort of stand for long periods of time. And she wanted to sort of, you know, basically show her. And if you're standing there and you're trying to lift up a heel to show someone else, you've got to put your arm around them for your balance, otherwise you're going to fall over. So the two of them were doing a sort of, well, here's my heel, here's your heel.
So that's what it was.
And that's what it was.
They were having a very girly chat.
They were talking about heels.
Completely serious, because, you know, it's a subject I return to time and time again.
You know, I mean, it's probably no different to the Prince Philip and, I don't know, and the president of somewhere swapping regimental tie anecdotes. I mean, there's no difference. So
it wasn't the faux pas that some in the media
wasn't a
had
faux
it.
pas.
Yeah.
And that was a strong relationship. And on a subsequent trip to London, the Queen heard that Mrs. Obama was just going to be in town, or totally privately, with her daughters, who were then school age. And she said, well, see if they'd like to come round for tea. And they said, well, that'd be lovely. Yeah, we'd love to bring the girls around for tea. And she said, well, would they like maybe a little carriage ride round the palace garden? And I was like, yes, that'd be lovely. So the Mrs. Obama and the Obama daughters had tea with the Queen, and then went on a little ride in one of the landaus around the, you know, they were just taking a little guided tour.
And that's not part of the official.
It's nothing. It's not official.
It's a very warm, personal invitation.
But, you know, talk about soft power. I mean, you know, how does that go down? You know.
Well, when we talk about soft power and the nitty gritty of it, what happens with the actual state banquet? Because that's, for me, the pinnacle of any state visit. You know, we talked about the table being laid out, but the meal itself is really interesting, isn't it? Because often that incorporates the best of each country. You can tell us a bit about what they get to eat.
There's a lot of planning about the food beforehand, and there'll be a lot of traffic between the palace and the visitors' embassy. In this case, the US Embassy, the White House, the Foreign Office, Downing Street. Everyone will be talking, and you've got to get the food right. And one of the things that the King is very keen on is sort of locally sourced ingredients, so that's really important. So they've got to make sure it sort of ticks those boxes, but you've got to make sure it's something that the visitor likes. I mean, when for example, when Nelson Mandela came, they established that, you know, he didn't like eating beef. Another thing actually about his visit, they established that because of his many years in prison, he liked to eat much earlier. So they actually moved the state banquet forward by a couple of hours. I mean, normally these things start at, you're expected to turn up at sort of 7:30, and then people tend to sort of sit down around 8:45, 9 o'clock. With Nelson Mandela, it was all done I think about 5:30. Yeah, because you want to make the guests feel comfortable. And so with Donald Trump, they'll certainly have, you know, been through likes and dislikes. I mean, he loved, when he came on his state visit in 2019, he loved that banquet. And I mean, they bring out the best wines. Now, Donald Trump doesn't drink, but I mean, that's not going to mean that in any way they're not going to shortchange the other guests on the claret that we'll be seeing at the banquet on the 17th of September. You know, it'll be great wine. So the master of the cellars will already be sort of planning, right, what goes with what, because until you know what the food is, you don't know what wine to serve. And there's this sort of fabulous process of laying the table, and they do have a tape. It's like a wooden ruler, and they will make sure it's exactly. I can't off the top of my head. I can't what is that? Something like 23 inches between each chair, or they measure the exact gap between the chairs and between the table settings. And every table setting, you've got to have, you know, sort of 2 or 3 glasses. You've got to have a glass for the
about
toes.
5 or 6 glasses.
Yeah,
I'm surprised anybody can stand up and walk away after they've had
it's
all
over.
those.
I know it's over 1,000 glasses on the table, and I know that the washing up is done that night because I've actually seen them do it. They go on into the early hours and they wash it all up by hand.
And I think
very precious, you know, china.
Yes. And I think you've written about this, the fact that it actually sped up a little bit over the years. I think the King's cut down on the soup course, which always used to be there. Why has he done that?
Well, no, it's really gone down considerably because there used to be a 5-course affair, and it was the late Queen actually who was trying to shorten them. She liked to have fairly short dinners. You know, she felt that you just don't want to sit there going on and on. Particularly, if you've got a guest who doesn't speak English and hasn't got much to say, it can get quite hard work. So I mean, that certainly won't be a problem with somebody like Donald Trump. But so it used to be 5 courses starting with soup. I think it was back in it was in the early noughties. I think it was the Queen of Denmark. I think was coming, and both she and the Queen of Denmark agreed that it'd be quite nice if the dinner was a little shorter. So I think she suggested maybe we could dispense with the soup. So the soup went, and then the king has got rid of the fruit, or what's actually called dessert, even though it's a very spectacular. It's a sort of plate of fruit, and everyone gets presented with a hollowed out pineapple, which has been sort of pre-cut into chunks. So you sort of lift off the leaf bit, and it's like a lid, and inside is just beautifully cut.
Maybe one for Meghan Markle's show. That sounds
yeah, exactly. Yeah, with love from the royal household. But that adds to the time sitting at the table. So they've removed that now. So it's down to an ordinary 3-course dinner, except there's nothing ordinary about it at all.
Ordinary, and some speeches as well, in which you praise your guest or your host, depending on who's speaking.
Yep.
And
you both each praises the other's nation, and there's the
you get a hint
anthem.
of the deals that have been done behind the scenes through the speeches as well, don't you? Because before this has all happened, this has been used to kind of leverage any kind of political trade deal between the two countries.
Yeah, you try and it's a bit of there's always a bit of humour in there. There's a bit of history, and sometimes it can get a bit delicate if it's a country that you fought a fairly vicious war with. But people, you just sort of get round it. You skirt around the embarrassing bits. That's clearly not going to be the case with the USA. There are so many things to touch on. You always try and do a bit of history, but also the sort of the crucial what's going on in the present, celebrate whatever trade deals, defence deals, that sort of thing.
And look to the future.
And a look to the future, and then the anthem at the end.
You talked about going back to kind of Queen Victoria's day and that kind of diplomacy that was used. I mean, in medieval Europe, they're a bit more risky. I mean, it reminds me of Henry VIII and King Francis I of France, and the Field of the Cloth of Gold in 1520 near Calais, where it was so many riches, kind of temporary palaces sprung up. Yeah. I mean, talk about a banquet. I mean, there were many, and this idea that you could show your wealth and you could show show off your prowess in that way, and then Queen Victoria kind of extended, in her own way, extended that kind of level of diplomacy. Started, I suppose, what we see as the template for the modern state visit today.
Yes, I think.
How do you think the history kind of plays into it?
I think that, as you say, Henry VIII and the Field of the Cloth of Gold. That probably was the original great kind of bilateral celebration.
Big summit.
Big summit, and then you have to remember. I mean, monarchs didn't really go abroad much. I mean, prior to Queen Victoria, our longest reigning monarch, George III. Never left. He didn't just never left Britain. He never left England. I mean, the furthest he went from London was, I think, on a trip to Worcester, and yet he's the guy who really was sort of built up what we would then go on to consider the British Empire, India, Australia, all these sort of places. I mean, it was an extraordinary reach that Britain had, led by a monarch who regarded the Isle of Wight as fairly treacherous. So monarchs didn't go away, and then one or two might have done, William, but earlier in their youth they did, and then but the idea of a reigning monarch actually travelling, it sort of bounced back. Queen Victoria liked to travel a bit, not so much. And Edward VII was a great traveller. George V, of course, travelled to India, and so the idea of roving heads of state became a thing, I suppose, in the early 20th century. But I mean, the first U.S. president to come to Buckingham Palace, and it wasn't a state visit, but he came to Britain, was Woodrow Wilson, who came in, I think it was 1919, after the First World War. But it was an occasional thing, because it took so long to get across the Atlantic. You didn't really have the time to do it.
Yeah.
But they have, I think the late Queen was clearly the absolute
so well travelled
maestro. Yeah, I mean she travelled further than any monarch in fact, she travelled further than all other monarchs put together.
I'm talking about the US as well. Obviously she travelled over to the US quite a lot.
She went there as a
several
princess.
times.
She went there on behalf of her father as a princess.
There are famous pictures of her dancing with Gerald Ford.
Oh, then that was the great trip when she went over for the bicentennial in 200 years of the USA in
1976, which begs the question, of course, next year.
Yeah.
Will a member of the royal family go over to the States? Do you think because that's historically what we've done to celebrate US independence? That will be a big moment for them.
It's a huge moment for America.
The 250th anniversary.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be
the Declaration.
Enormous. Yeah, it's going to be absolutely enormous, and
do you think we'll see the King go?
Well, I would imagine it would either be the King or the Prince of Wales. I mean, it's got to be absolute top level, because it's a huge moment for America, and there are only sort of two teams involved really. It's the Americans who won and the Brits who lost. That's it. There's no escape. There's absolutely no escape for getting the Macrons over, or the Chancellor of Germany. I mean, nothing to do with them. It was America kicking out the Brits, and it was quite sweet in 1976, because there was a lot of diplomatic toing and froing on how should we pitch this. Because even 200 years on, it's got to hit the right note, and the Queen and the Palace felt that that America should have its sort of big celebration of kicking out the Brits, and then she'd come just afterwards. They felt that actually having her there on the 4th of July on the day with all the sort of fireworks going off, that would sort of hit slightly the wrong note. So they had all the big events, and then just a few days later, it's Royal Yacht Britannia sails in. With the Queen on board, and I mean, it was fabulous. Everyone went completely tonto, and she was sort of toasted up and down the East Coast, and as you say, culminating in this great banquet on the White House lawn with Gerald Ford, and there she is, dancing away.
Goodness.
Won't be any dancing this time.
The echoes of history, I think, will be will be with us, won't they? Especially in this visit and next year, if one of the members of the royal family goes.
It's one of those key moments in the sort of transatlantic relationship where and there were a lot of jokes last time about George III, both Gerald Ford and the Queen, constant references in speeches to the fact that it was a little bit awkward back then, but it's turned out well. And I always remember on when Barack Obama came on that 2011 state visit, and they'd laid out all the various sort of key pieces of UK, US memorabilia.
I love this bit. You talk about getting the treasures out from the royal collection, because they bring out stuff from the archives. Yeah. And the stores must be amazing to go and have a look through there. But
I mean, on the US relationship, I mean, there's just so much to choose from. But there's this famous note in the archives written by George III, which where he says in his hand, he goes, "America is lost!" Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Exclamation mark! Oh, what will befall us? It's the end of the world. And the Queen shared that to Barack Obama. And
didn't age well, that note.
Well, no, Barack Obama cracked a joke. He went, just a temporary blip in the special relationship, which I thought was very, very quick-witted, and everybody laughed at that. It was a good line.
There has been a lot of humour, hasn't there? I think over the years, it'd be interesting to see what treasures they bring out for the Trump visit. We talked before we started recording actually about some of the celebrity elements involved. Do you think we're going to have lots of stars at that banquet?
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
is that something they're going to be looking to wheel
There's-
out, that guest list for the state banquet?
Yeah, if
And two banquets, perhaps.
yeah, we
if
don't
we have the
yet
state
know.
banquet.
Yes, there always used to be a tradition that you had, if there was time, you would have the, obviously on the first night, the monarch hosts the state banquet, which obviously the king will have at Windsor Castle. But traditionally on these state visits, on the second night, the visitor then returns the compliment by having what they call the return banquet. And with George W. Bush, he had one for the Queen at Winfield House, which is the U.S. ambassador's residence. And I talked to him about that. I interviewed him for my biography of the Queen, and he was very keen. He knew that the Queen liked musicals, so he wanted to have a sort of musical element. So he'd arranged an evening of sort of musical hits, and he got Andrew Lloyd Webber in to do it, which is what you can do when you're the
Fantastic.
president of the US and you're entertaining the Queen to dinner, and you ring up Lord Lloyd Webber and he goes, yes, I'd be delighted to help. So he did that. And then
And that will be something that they arrange.
Yeah, they will
the
arrange
return,
it. Yeah,
the sort
and
of return.
Barack Obama did the same thing in 2011. So he had a return banquet, and he knew as well that the Queen loved musicals, loved Hollywood, and they actually arranged for her to sit next to Tom Hanks at dinner that night. So
That's
she had the
brilliant.
president on one side, Tom Hanks on the other. So it's POTUS and Forrest Gump. She was delighted.
Absolutely.
And Macron did it. So when the king went over to Versailles on that state visit, which you were on, Kate. I mean, remind me, but I think somewhere on the table there was Mick Jagger was there,
Yes.
and I think Hugh Grant. So I mean,
Some proper
there's always a bit
stars.
of that, So I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll see some fairly major league celebs. There was a big problem when the Reagans came in 1982, and again I found this while I was writing my book by digging around in the archives, and the Reagans had turned out they were big fans of Brideshead Revisited, which was a
Right.
big show on ITV at the time, and it was on TV in America. And the British ambassador was saying it really would be wonderful if we could get one of the stars of Brideshead Revisited to the banquet. And so the sort of hunt was on for, who can we get? And they were all busy filming other stuff. And, Jeremy Irons was, I don't know, somewhere else. And in the end, they managed to get Anthony Andrews along. So the Reagans had their Brideshead fix at dinner.
That's brilliant. I love all the preparation that goes into it, the kind of scurrying around behind the scenes that you never see.
Yeah.
The swan with the
Yes,
sort of like
yeah.
flapping feet underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very
And the
much
gifts
like
as
that.
well. Can't wait to see the gifts. Apparently in 2009, I think it was, Obama gave the late Queen, an iPod,
Oh, yes.
which speaks to the moment
Yeah.
of the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes you see that some of these gifts sort of kind of slowly sort of disappear, but some always just sort of hit the spot. I mean, I know the Queen was always using the silver samovar that Boris Yeltsin gave her to make tea. That was I think it's still.
So it actually came out, and it was used. It wasn't
Yeah,
just
yeah,
put in a
very
cupboard
much.
somewhere or in a
Yes.
store.
Get Mr. Yeltsin's samovar. We're going to have tea with someone.
It was a great talking point.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah.
breaking the ice as you pour the tea, something to say.
It's rather more useful in the early years of her reign when there was a phase when everyone would give her animals, which
Animals,
was
yeah.
slightly problematic. I think she went to somewhere in Africa. A president gave her an elephant, and that took quite a lot of. It was quite expensive getting the elephant home, and she got two jaguars. I remember from her state visit to Brazil. And was on a visit years before that, 1961. She was on a visit to Gambia, and just as the royal yacht was about to leave, this little boy sort of ran up the jetty, and where the sort of equerry was standing with this biscuit tin, and said, "This is for Her Majesty." And, well, that's very kind. Sort of opened to see what it was. It was a baby crocodile. And what do we do with that?
Cheers for that.
So the equerry took it to Martin
kind.
Charteris, the Deputy Private Secretary. And the Queen said, "That's very kind. What do we do?" And Martin Charteris said, "Oh, put it in my bath." So the baby crocodile sat in this bath in the Royal Yacht all the way back to Britain and lived out its days happily at London Zoo.
Did it really?
Yeah. But
How
anyway, we don't do
fantastic.
animals anymore after a while.
Oh, no, in Samoa last year, I think we had, at
Yeah.
Chilcombe, we had the King and Queen were presented with a butchered pig, so
Oh.
a dead pig as a gift.
Mm.
And it was sort of Thanks, that's so kind. We're leaving tomorrow. Obviously, went to the local village to feed the local village, and a big feast was had in their honour. So it was fine. But that immediate kind of, oh, thank you. What do we do with this? How very kind.
That happened with the late Queen on her famous tour after the coronation, and as she was leaving Tonga. Queen Saloti of Tonga brought out this huge, it was a sort of roasted pig, had been roasted on a spit, but it was already it's getting a little sort of high in the sun, and it was ferried out to the royal yacht. And it's like, what on earth do we do with that? And the answer was, well, just wait till we're out of view and it's going over the sun. And so the sharks had a big lunch that day.
Oh my goodness. Oh well, at least somebody benefited from it, I suppose. There's so much to say.
They're great fun, Kate.
They are great fun,
state visits, there's so much home and away. There's always a few dramas.
A few dramas, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There could be the odd protest, as we've seen in previous state visits. The US presidents don't tend to have the carriage processions because of security reasons, but we'll see. Yeah. So Keir Starmer recently mentioned there might be something extra special for Trump. Didn't he?
Well, you can always sort of tailor things a little bit. I mean, so that time when, and again, it was not a state visit. It was just an official visit by President Obama right at the end of his presidency. He wanted to be the first world leader to congratulate the Queen on her 90th birthday. So she was 90, this is back in 2016. And the very next day, he was on that sort of round the world farewell, wind down tour. But he timed it so that he came to Windsor that day. And there'd been this huge debate between the Foreign Office and the White House and the Secret Service and the police and everybody, because when the Queen heard he was flying in to Windsor, she said, "Oh, well, that's great. Tell him to land in the park, and Philip and I will come and pick him up." And the Secret Service sort of was saying, "No, this cannot happen. The President can only be driven by the Secret Service." And the palace and Downing Street were going, well, I think the Queen is quite determined to come and pick up the President and the First Lady herself with the Duke. And it was the only time in his entire presidency, and his staff told me this row went right the way up to the top, to the President. And he said, look, frankly, I'm pretty safe in the Queen's car. I'll get in with her. Yeah. So they turn up, fly in, and there is Prince Philip and the Queen with a Range Rover to pick him up. That's it. It's like Mum, Dad and the kids in the back. And they drive off up to the castle. It was the only time that he did not have a Secret Service chauffeur in his entire 8 years in the White House. He had Prince Philip instead.
And when Trump landed his Air Force One helicopter in the grounds of Buckingham Palace,
oh yes,
he scorched the lawns with all the taking off and landing.
Yeah, the gardener was not happy.
It was Marine One, I think, the helicopter. Sorry.
Well, the problem is it's not just Marine One, but whenever he flies, it's always 3 helicopters minimum, because you've got all the staff, and then there's a decoy one as well. So there was actually 3 of these things all came in and made fairly big holes in the palace lawn. But Windsor, that's not a problem. You've got the whole Windsor estate. It's all sealed off. The only thing you've got to worry about is Heathrow air traffic, but I suspect they might stop that for a few minutes.
You think?
I think they can do what they like. I mean, if POTUS is flying in and the King's entertaining, I think Heathrow will do what it's told.
Heathrow brought to a standstill. Well, let's see. It'd be brilliant. Whatever happens, I think it's going to be a spectacle, a fest, as I think Trump has described it himself.
It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you so much, Robert, for coming on. It's such a pleasure to have you on and hear your insight about state visits, past and present. Particularly on the day that the latest edition of your new book is out, Charles III, The Inside Story, which I do recommend. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kate. It's very kind of you. I've thoroughly enjoyed all looking back and looking forward. And
I'll see you in Windsor.
I'll see you in Windsor in September.
See you in the Quadrangle.
Okay.